My name is Velma Thompson, and at 67 years old, I never thought I'd hear my daughter in law wonder aloud why I was still breathing. I had just arrived at my son Thomas's backyard barbecue when those words stopped me cold. Why is she even still alive? Martha's voice carried clearly from the patio. After losing my Frank 2 years ago, I'd faced plenty of loneliness, but nothing prepared me for this betrayal. Most mothers would have turned around and left nursing their wounds in private. But not me. I took a deep breath and decided right then what I would do next. Before I tell you what happened, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Trust me, what I did next changed everything. Frank and I built a beautiful life together, over 45 years of marriage. We raised our son Thomas with all the love and support we could provide, sacrificing to put him through college so he could have opportunities we never had. Thomas was our only child, and the bond between us was special. He would call me several times a week, stop by for Sunday dinners, and even took me on vacation with him occasionally after he established his accounting career. Everything changed when Martha entered the picture 8 years ago. Thomas met her at a charity event for the hospital, where she worked as an administrator. She was attractive, ambitious, and 10 years younger than my son. At first, I was happy for Thomas. He had been so focused on his career that his personal life had taken a back seat. I welcomed Martha warmly into our family, inviting her to holiday gatherings and making an effort to bond with her. The early signs of trouble were subtle. Martha would reschedule our family dinners at the last minute, claiming work emergencies. She would make little comments about our modest home in the suburbs, comparing it to the luxury properties she was constantly browsing online. When Thomas brought her to visit, she would spend more time on her phone than engaging in conversation with Frank and me. Despite the growing tension, the birth of their children brought me immense joy. Amanda came first, a beautiful little girl with Thomas's eyes and curious nature. 2 years later, James arrived, a bundle of energy and laughter. I cherished being a grandmother and tried to be present in their lives as much as possible. "Mom, you're spoiling them," Thomas would say with a smile when I brought over handmade clothes or toys I had carefully selected. "That's what grandmothers are supposed to do," I would respond. Frank noticed the changes in our family dynamic before I was willing to acknowledge them. "Velma," he would say, "Martha is driving a wedge between you and Thomas. You need to talk to our son before it's too late." But I didn't want to cause problems. I told myself that Martha was just establishing her own family traditions, that it was natural for a young family to want their independence. I kept making excuses for the increasing distance, the missed phone calls, the shorter visits. Then Frank was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The next 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and watching my beloved husband slowly slip away. Thomas was supportive at first, visiting regularly and helping with medical decisions. But as Frank's condition deteriorated, Thomas's visits became less frequent. Martha rarely came at all, always finding excuses about the children's schedules or her work commitments. When Frank passed away, Thomas stood by my side at the funeral. But Martha kept checking her watch throughout the service. They left the reception early, with Martha claiming the children were overtired. I was too grief-stricken to protest. The loneliness that followed Frank's death was overwhelming. A house once filled with laughter and love felt cavernous and empty. I would wake up reaching for him, only to find his side of the bed cold. I would make coffee for two out of habit, then cry as I poured his cup down the drain. The silence was deafening. I tried to fill my days with purpose. I volunteered at the local library, joined a book club, and attempted to maintain connections with friends. But nothing could fill the Frank-shaped hole in my heart. And increasingly, I felt another absence: my son and grandchildren. Thomas's calls became rare, usually brief and distracted. When I called him, Martha often answered and made excuses for why Thomas couldn't come to the phone. Invitations to visit my grandchildren were met with elaborate explanations about how busy their schedule was with soccer practice, piano lessons, and play dates with the right families in their neighborhood. Perhaps next month would be better, Velma, Martha would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I lived on a modest, fixed income from Frank's pension and our savings. We had always been careful with money, living below our means in the three-bedroom ranch home we purchased when Thomas was a baby. It wasn't fancy, but it was paid for, comfortable, and filled with memories. In contrast, Thomas and Martha lived in an exclusive subdivision with manicured lawns and imposing homes. Martha drove a luxury SUV and was always dressed in designer clothing. Thomas had done well in his career, but I sometimes wondered if they were overextending themselves financially to maintain their lifestyle. The children need to grow up in the right environment with the right connections, Martha once explained when I questioned why they had purchased such an expensive home. We're investing in their future. As the months passed after Frank's death, I felt increasingly like an afterthought in my son's life. The woman who had once been the center of his world had been relegated to occasional duty visits and perfunctory phone calls on holidays. I missed my grandchildren terribly and worried about the values they were absorbing in a household so focused on appearances and social status. Frank, I would whisper at night to the empty space beside me. What should I do? How do I reach our son? But no answer came, and I continued to drift further from the family I longed to be close to. The invitation came via text message, not even a phone call. Mom, we're having a barbecue Saturday, 3 p.m. Martha thought you might want to come see the kids. It had been almost 2 months since I'd last seen my grandchildren despite my attempts to arrange visits. The casual nature of the invitation sent just 2 days before the event suggested it was an afterthought. Still, my heart leapt at the chance to see Amanda and James. I responded immediately. I'd love to come. Can I bring anything? Thomas's reply came hours later. No need. Martha has everything handled. Of course she did. Martha always had everything handled, in a way that left no room for my contributions. Still, I decided to bake my apple crumble, Thomas's favorite dessert since childhood and something I knew Martha, with her store-bought preferences, would never make. I spent Friday carefully selecting ingredients and preparing the dessert, making sure the crust was perfectly golden and the filling had just the right balance of sweetness and spice. Frank always said my apple crumble could make a grown man cry, and it had won blue ribbons at the county fair 3 years running. Saturday morning, I stood before my closet considering what to wear. Most of my clothes were practical and comfortable cotton slacks, simple blouses, sensible shoes. Nothing like the fashionable outfits Martha and her friends wore. Finally, I selected a light blue dress Frank had always loved, paired with a cardigan, and my good pearl earrings, a gift from Thomas on my 60th birthday, before Martha's influence had fully taken hold. I took extra care with my appearance, applying light makeup and styling my silver hair. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who had aged but still held herself with dignity. Frank's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "You look beautiful, Velma. Always have." The drive to Thomas and Martha's subdivision took 20 minutes. As I passed through the ornate entrance gates and navigated the winding streets, I felt the familiar sense of not belonging. The houses grew larger and more imposing until I reached their street, lined with luxury vehicles and professionally landscaped yards. Thomas and Martha's colonial-style house stood tall and imposing, its white columns and perfect symmetry, projecting an aura of success and stability. The 3-car garage housed Thomas's sedan, Martha's SUV, and a convertible sports car Thomas had purchased last year during what I privately suspected was a midlife crisis. I parked my 10-year-old Toyota at the curb, gathered my purse and the carefully packaged dessert, and walked up the immaculate brick pathway to the backyard gate. Music and conversation floated over the fence, more voices than I had expected. It seemed this wasn't just a family gathering, but a proper party. Taking a deep breath, I opened the gate and stepped into the backyard. The space had been transformed since my last visit. New landscaping, a built-in outdoor kitchen, and an expanded patio created a resort-like atmosphere. About 20 people milled around drinking from wine glasses and talking in small groups. I spotted Thomas at the grill, beer in hand, chatting with two men in polo shirts. Martha stood near the house, the center of attention, in a group of women wearing sundresses and oversized sunglasses. My grandchildren were nowhere in sight. Martha noticed me first. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she excused herself from her friends and approached me with arms outstretched for an air kiss. "Velma, you made it," she said, her voice pitched to carry. "How lovely." "Hello, Martha. Thank you for including me today," I replied, offering the dessert. I brought Thomas's favorite apple crumble. A flash of annoyance crossed her face before her social mask slipped back into place. "How thoughtful. We have a professional dessert spread already set up, but I'll just add this to the kitchen." She took the container with her fingertips as if it might contaminate her and handed it off to a passing teenager who appeared to be helping with service. "Thomas is over by the grill," Martha said, already turning back toward her friends. "The children are upstairs with the nanny. They'll come down later." A nanny. When their grandmother was right here, eager to spend time with them, I swallowed my hurt and made my way across the lawn to greet my son. "Mom, you made it," Thomas said, giving me a one-armed hug while continuing to flip burgers. "Get yourself a drink. Bar's over there. It's good to see you, son," I said, trying to catch his eye. "The yard looks different. You've done a lot of work since I was here last." "Martha's been working with a landscape designer. Cost a fortune, but she says it's important for entertaining clients." He lowered his voice. "The firm's partners are here today. I should probably make the rounds soon." So this was a business function masquerading as a family gathering. No wonder I'd received such a last-minute invitation. I was an afterthought, someone to occupy the grandchildren perhaps. "When will Amanda and James come down?" I asked. "I've missed them terribly." Thomas checked his watch. "Martha scheduled them to make an appearance around 4 before they head to some birthday party. You should catch them then." Scheduled an appearance for their own children at a family barbecue. I bit back my comment and nodded, moving away to give Thomas space to continue his grilling duties. As I walked around the perimeter of the gathering, I noticed the other guests, mostly couples in their 30s and 40s, clearly part of Martha and Thomas's professional and social circle. No one introduced themselves to me or made an effort to include me in conversation. I was invisible, an elderly woman of no consequence in this curated display of success and status. The sense of not belonging intensified as I observed the expensive watches, the casual mentions of vacation homes and private schools, the subtle competition in every conversation about careers and achievements. This world was so far removed from the values Frank and I had raised Thomas, with honesty, humility, and the importance of family connections over material success. I found a seat at an empty table in the corner of the yard, sipping a glass of water and watching the social dynamics play out before me. Martha moved from group to group like a queen holding court, laughing too loudly at jokes and touching arms for emphasis. Thomas followed in her wake, less comfortable, but clearly trying to impress his colleagues. Neither of them checked on me or made an effort to introduce me to anyone. I was a prop, not a participant, the obligatory mother whose presence could be noted and then ignored. As the afternoon wore on, I grew increasingly uncomfortable and out of place. The carefully constructed facade of perfection that Martha had created felt suffocating. I decided to use the bathroom and then perhaps make an excuse to leave early. I took the long way around the yard, admiring the new flower beds and water feature Martha had installed. The garden was beautiful but sterile, somehow lacking the personal touches that make a space feel loved rather than just expensively maintained. As I approached the side of the house, where a small patio created a private seating area, I heard voices, Martha and several women, their conversation animated and punctuated by laughter. I swear every time she visits, she brings another horrible homemade dish, Martha was saying. Today it was some apple dessert that probably tastes like cardboard. I gave it to the server girl to throw away. My steps faltered. She was talking about my blue ribbon apple crumble, the one Thomas had loved since childhood. And did you see what she's wearing? That dress must be 20 years old. Thomas keeps saying we should help her update her wardrobe, but why bother at her age? Another voice chimed in. Barbara, you don't understand. Martha continued. She's constantly trying to insert herself into our lives, calling all the time, wanting to see the children. I've had to be creative with excuses. It must be so difficult dealing with an interfering mother-in-law. A third voice sympathized. The worst part is that she's sitting on that house, Martha said, her voice dropping slightly. 4 bedrooms in a great neighborhood, and she rattles around in it alone. Do you know what we could get for that property in today's market? But Thomas won't even bring up selling it. My heart began to pound in my chest. They were discussing my home, the home Frank and I had lovingly maintained for decades, where we had raised Thomas, celebrated holidays, and built a life together. Why is she even still alive? Martha said, her voice cold and calculating. She's just a burden on Thomas, constantly needing emotional support since her husband died. As if we don't have enough on our plate with the children and our careers. The words hit me like a physical blow. Why am I still alive? My daughter-in-law was questioning my very right to exist. Have you considered assisted living? One of the women suggested. My mother-in-law moved into Golden Sunset last year, and it's been such a relief not having to worry about her anymore. I've been researching places, Martha confirmed. The challenge is convincing Thomas. He has this ridiculous sense of obligation to her, but I'm working on him. I think if we can get her to sell the house using the money for a nice retirement community would be an easy next step. And then you could use the leftover money for that vacation home you've been eyeing? Another voice added with a knowing laugh. Exactly. Martha agreed. Thomas works so hard. He deserves a place where we can truly relax away from all responsibilities. Including his mother, was the unspoken conclusion. Does she have any health issues you could leverage? The first voice asked. My cousin's mother-in-law had a minor fall, and they used that to convince her she couldn't live alone anymore. Not yet. Martha sighed. She's annoyingly healthy for her age, but everyone slips eventually, right? The women laughed again, the sound like broken glass in my ears. I stood frozen, unable to move forward or retreat. My breath came in short gasps, and I pressed a hand against the side of the house to steady myself. The casual cruelty of their conversation, the way they discussed me as a problem to be solved rather than a person with feelings and value, left me reeling. For a moment I considered quietly leaving the party, going home to lick my wounds, and perhaps finally accepting that my relationship with my son was irreparably damaged by Martha's influence. It would be the easier path, avoiding confrontation and preserving the surface-level peace in the family. But as the initial shock faded, something else rose within me, a slow-burning anger that had been suppressed for too long. I thought of Frank and how he would have reacted to hearing someone speak about me this way. I thought of the values we had tried to instill in Thomas, values that seemed to have been eroded by years of Martha's materialistic influence. Why should I slink away in shame when I'd done nothing wrong? Why should I continue to accept being marginalized in my own family? Most importantly, why should I allow Martha's toxic agenda to potentially harm my grandchildren's understanding of family loyalty and respect for elders? In that moment, I made a decision. I would not retreat. I would not pretend I hadn't heard. I would confront this situation head-on with dignity and truth. Whatever the outcome, I would no longer be complicit in my own erasure from family life. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my 20-year-old dress. It was actually only 5 years old. Straightened my shoulders and stepped forward into the small patio area where Martha and her 3 friends sat with their wine glasses. Ladies, I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Martha's wine glass froze halfway to her lips, her eyes widening in horror. The three other women, all sleek, expensively dressed and groomed to perfection, wore identical expressions of shock. Velma, Martha stammered, recovering first. We didn't see you there? Clearly, I replied. I turned to face her friends. I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Velma Thompson, Thomas's mother, the one who's annoyingly healthy for her age and whose continued existence seems to be such an inconvenience. One of the women, a blonde with a tennis tan and diamond studs, the size of small marbles, had the grace to look ashamed. The others glanced at Martha, waiting for her to handle the situation. Velma, you misunderstood. Martha began, her voice taking on the condescending tone she often used with me. We were just having a private conversation about the challenges of caring for aging parents. No, Martha, I said firmly. There was no misunderstanding. You were discussing ways to pressure my son into forcing me out of my home so you could profit from its sale. You were speculating about health issues I might develop that would give you leverage, and you were questioning why I am even still alive. Martha's face flushed red. You were eavesdropping on a private conversation? I was walking to the bathroom when I heard my name and stopped. I corrected her. But let's not deflect from what I heard. By now, our conversation had drawn attention. Other party guests were looking our way, curiosity evident on their faces. Martha's eyes darted nervously to the gathering audience, her social mask slipping. This isn't the time or place for this discussion, she hissed. I disagree, I said. This seems like exactly the right time and place. You've been systematically isolating me from my son and grandchildren for years. You've made me feel unwelcome in my own family. And now I discover you've been actively plotting to remove me from my home for your financial benefit. That's not true. Martha protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I asked. Then please correct my understanding. Explain what you meant when you asked why I'm still alive. Martha had no answer. Her friends began to shift uncomfortably, clearly, wanting to distance themselves from the unfolding scene. I continued, my voice growing stronger. Since Frank died, I've experienced the deepest loneliness of my life. My husband of 45 years, my best friend and partner, is gone. During this painful time, my own son has become a stranger to me, and my grandchildren are being raised to see me as an occasional visitor rather than an important part of their lives. People had stopped their conversations now, the party falling silent as guests turned to watch our confrontation. I saw Thomas making his way through the crowd, his face concerned and confused. Despite all this, I've tried to respect your boundaries, Martha. I've accepted last-minute cancellations and flimsy excuses. I've watched you throw away food I've prepared with love. I've endured your not-so-subtle comments about my clothes, my home, my very existence. But hearing you discuss me as if I'm nothing more than an obstacle to your material ambitions crosses a line I can no longer ignore. Thomas reached us, looking back and forth between Martha and me. What's going on here? He asked. I turned to my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had drifted so far from the values we had taught him. Thomas, I came around the side of the house and overheard Martha and her friends discussing me. Martha asked them why I'm even still alive, because I'm just a burden to you. She talked about pressuring you to make me sell my home so you could use the money for a vacation property. They were discussing which assisted living facilities might be suitable for dumping me in. Thomas's face drained of color. He turned to Martha. Is this true? Martha's composure cracked entirely. She's exaggerating. We were just talking about options for her future. She can't live alone forever, Thomas. That house is too big for one person, and the money is just sitting there when it could be used for our family, for the children's future. Our family, I repeated. The last time I checked, I was part of this family too. That house is where you grew up, Thomas. It's filled with memories of your father. And the money isn't just sitting there. It's providing me with security and independence in my later years. Thomas looked stricken. Martha, tell me you didn't ask why my mother is still alive. Martha's silence was damning. By now, Amanda and James had appeared on the patio, likely drawn by the commotion. Amanda's eyes were wide, taking in the tense scene. James clutched a toy car in his small hand, looking confused. "Daddy, why is everyone fighting?" Amanda asked, her voice small and worried. Thomas knelt down beside his daughter. "It's not a fight, sweetheart. It's a misunderstanding that grown-ups need to talk about." "Is Grandma Velma okay?" James asked, looking at me with concern. My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. Despite Martha's efforts to limit our contact, my grandchildren still cared about me. "I'm okay, James," I assured him with a gentle smile. Sometimes adults need to have difficult conversations to sort things out. Martha, seeing the children, attempted to regain control of the situation. "Thomas, we should continue this discussion privately. Our guests heard my mother accuse you of wishing she wasn't alive." Thomas interrupted, his voice tight with anger. "I think we're past worrying about appearances." One of Martha's friends stood up. "We should go," she murmured, nudging the others. They quickly retreated, leaving Martha alone to face us. More guests began to make quiet excuses and drift toward the exit. The carefully orchestrated social event was disintegrating around us. "Thomas, you know how emotional your mother has been since your father died," Martha said, switching tactics. "She's lonely and clearly not thinking clearly." "She misinterpreted a casual conversation." "Did she?" Thomas asked. "Because this fits with other things I've noticed, Martha. The way you always have excuses when mom wants to see the kids. The way you dismiss her opinions and contributions. The comments you make about her house being wasted on one person." Martha's eyes hardened. "Fine, you want honesty. Yes, I think your mother is clinging to a house that's too big for her, out of sentimentality. Yes, I think the money tied up in that property could be better used for our future, for the children's college funds, for investments that would benefit all of us. And yes, I think your mother uses her widow status to manipulate your emotions and demand more of your time than we can reasonably give with our busy lives." The naked greed and resentment in her voice shocked even the remaining guests, who exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Manipulation?" I echoed, incredulous. "I've been practically begging for scraps of attention from my own son and grandchildren. How is that manipulation?" "You've been smothering us," Martha snapped. "Always wanting visits, always calling, always trying to be involved. We have our own lives, our own family unit." "I'm part of that family," I said quietly. Or at least I thought I was. Thomas looked between us, confusion and pain evident on his face. "Martha, my mother has asked to see us maybe once a week at most. That's hardly smothering. And the house, we've discussed this. That's my childhood home, and it's mom's decision what happens to it. We're doing fine financially. We don't need that money." Martha laughed bitterly. "Fine. Do you know how much debt we're in, Thomas? The country club membership, the children's private school tuition, this house, that's twice what we can actually afford. We're drowning, and there sits your mother on a 4-bedroom property that's fully paid off in a neighborhood that's tripled in value." Thomas stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Is that what this is about, money?" "It's about practicality," Martha insisted. "Your mother is being selfish, hanging on to assets that could help secure our children's future." "My assets," I reminded her firmly. "The home Frank and I worked for decades to pay off. The home where we raised Thomas with love and values that seem to have been forgotten." Amanda tugged at Thomas's sleeve. "Daddy, is Grandma Velma in trouble? Does she have to sell her house?" The innocent question hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity and cruelty of the situation. My 7-year-old granddaughter understood the injustice more clearly than her mother did. Thomas picked up Amanda and gave her a reassuring hug. "No, sweetheart. Grandma's house is hers, and no one can make her sell it if she doesn't want to." Martha made a sound of frustration. "This is exactly the problem. You always take her side." "I'm not taking sides," Thomas said, his voice hardening. "I'm stating facts. And right now, I'm wondering why my wife sees my widowed mother as a financial opportunity rather than a beloved family member. The remaining guests had given up any pretense of not listening, openly watching the drama unfold. Martha seemed to suddenly remember their presence and tried to salvage her social standing. I think we've all had enough excitement for today, she announced with a brittle smile. Perhaps we should call it an afternoon. I agree, I said, gathering my purse. I should go. Mom, no, Thomas protested. You don't have to leave. I think it's best if I do, I replied. We all need time to process what's happened here. Martha looked relieved at my decision, which only confirmed I was making the right choice. I needed space to think, to decide how to move forward with this new and painful understanding of my place in my son's household. I'll call you tomorrow, Mom, Thomas promised, still holding Amanda while James pressed against his leg. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. With as much dignity as I could muster, I walked through the yard, filled with watching eyes, past the expensive outdoor kitchen and manicured flower beds, and out the gate to my sensible Toyota, parked on the curb. As I drove away, tears finally spilled down my cheeks. But beneath the hurt, a strange sense of liberation was taking root. The truth, however painful, was finally out in the open. And in that truth lay the possibility of change. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and racing thoughts. When I pulled into my driveway, the sight of my modest home, the one Martha coveted for its market value, brought fresh pain. This was the house where Frank had carried me over the threshold as newlyweds, where we had brought baby Thomas home from the hospital, where we had celebrated holidays and weathered storms together for over 4 decades. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering my composure before going inside. The house felt emptier than ever. As I walked through the door, the silence a stark contrast to the chaotic scene I had just left. I kicked off my shoes, hung up my cardigan, and sank into Frank's old recliner in the living room. "Oh, Frank," I whispered to the empty room. "What a mess this all is." My phone began ringing almost immediately, Thomas calling his name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk, wasn't sure what to say or how to process the raw wound that had been opened at the party. As evening fell, Thomas called 6 more times. He left voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to, and sent text messages I only glanced at. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry about what happened. Please let me know you're okay." I eventually sent a brief text. "I'm home safe. Need time to think. We'll talk tomorrow." That night was one of the longest of my life, second only to the night Frank died. I moved through the house like a ghost, touching familiar objects and remembering the life we had built here. In our bedroom, I opened Frank's side of the closet and breathed in the fading scent of him on his favorite sweater. "What would you do, Frank?" I asked the empty room. "How did we raise a son who would allow his wife to treat me this way? Where did we go wrong?" No answer came, of course, just the ticking of the bedside clock and the occasional passing car on our quiet street. I barely slept, rising before dawn to make coffee and sit at the kitchen table where Frank and I had shared thousands of meals over the years. The morning light gradually filled the room, illuminating the simple, comfortable space that Martha dismissed as outdated and insufficient. My phone rang again around 8. Thomas again. This time I answered. "Mom?" His voice was strained, exhausted. "Good morning, Thomas," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Can I come see you today, alone? We need to talk about what happened." I took a deep breath. "Yes, come at 10. When Thomas arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept either. His hair was uncombed, his eyes bloodshot, his normally crisp button-down wrinkled. He stood awkwardly on the porch as if unsure of his welcome in the home where he had grown up. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. We sat in the living room, the space between us filled with unspoken words. Thomas looked around at the familiar furnishings, his eyes lingering on the family photos arranged on the mantel, pictures of him growing up, his wedding day, the grandchildren as babies. Mom, I don't even know where to begin, he finally said. The truth would be a good start, I replied quietly. He nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The truth. Okay, he took a deep breath. After you left yesterday, Martha and I had the biggest fight of our marriage. The things she said. He shook his head. I never realized how she really felt about you, about this house, about money in general. And how do you feel, Thomas? I asked. That's what I need to know. He met my eyes directly for the first time. Ashamed, deeply ashamed that I allowed this situation to develop, that I didn't see what was happening, that I didn't protect our relationship. Our relationship has been fading for years. I said, the hurt of that reality still fresh. Since Martha came into your life, but especially since your father died. Thomas nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I know, and I have no excuse. I let Martha control our family calendar, our social circle, our priorities. I worked longer hours to maintain the lifestyle she wanted. I told myself it was all for the children, for their opportunities and advantages. And what about your father and me? The values we taught you. Family loyalty, living within your means, treating others with respect regardless of their status or wealth. His face crumpled. I've lost sight of all of it, Mom. Somewhere along the way, I started measuring success by my house size and car model, instead of by the quality of my relationships and the integrity of my choices. It was a hard truth, but hearing him acknowledge it eased something in my heart. Martha mentioned debt, I said carefully. Is that true? Thomas sighed heavily. Yes, the house is mortgaged to the hilt. We have significant credit card debt. Martha's SUV is leased at a rate we can barely afford. The country club membership, the private schools, the landscaping service, the summer camps, it's all built on financial quicksand. Why, Thomas? You make a good living. Your father and I taught you about saving and living within your means. Keeping up with the Joneses, he said bitterly. Martha is obsessed with appearances, with status. Each time we achieve one level of success, she moves the goalposts. A bigger house, a more prestigious neighborhood, more exclusive schools for the kids. I've been working 60-hour weeks trying to keep up, and it's still not enough. And my house became a target, I said, understanding dawning. A potential source of funds to maintain the illusion. He nodded miserably. Martha has been pushing me to talk to you about selling for over a year. She has it all planned out. You would move to a small condo or retirement community, and we would use the extra money for our financial needs. And what did you say to these suggestions? I asked, holding my breath. I kept putting her off, he admitted, telling her it wasn't the right time, that you were still grieving Dad, that we couldn't ask you to leave your home. But she became more insistent after I was passed over for a promotion last month. Our financial situation is getting tighter, and she saw your house as the solution. I absorbed this information slowly. So when Martha asked why I'm still alive, it was because I'm an obstacle to her financial plans. Thomas winced. Mom, I can't even begin to tell you how horrified I was when you told me she said that. No matter what financial pressures were under, that kind of statement is unforgivable. And yet you've been allowing her to isolate me from you and the children. I pointed out, maybe not actively, but through your silence and compliance. Yes, he acknowledged. I've been a coward, taking the path of least resistance. It was easier to go along with Martha's excuses than to insist on regular family time with you. Easier to work late than face the tension at home. Easier to pretend everything was fine than admit my marriage has been struggling for years. This last confession surprised me. Years. Thomas nodded. Martha and I haven't been truly happy together since before James was born. We've been going through the motions, focused on appearances and acquisitions, rather than on our actual relationship. I've stayed for the children, telling myself a troubled home with both parents was better than a broken home. Is it though? I asked gently. What are the children learning from this arrangement? What values are they absorbing? Not the right ones, Thomas admitted. Amanda has started commenting on her friends' clothes and houses comparing and ranking them by how expensive they seem. James had a meltdown last week because his birthday party wasn't going to be as elaborate as his friends. They're learning that status and possessions matter more than kindness and character. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of these realizations settling between us. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice stronger. Mom, I've made a decision. After our fight last night, Martha slept in the guest room. This morning, I told her I want a separation. I need time to reevaluate my priorities and decide if our marriage can be salvaged. In the meantime, I've insisted on a more equitable arrangement regarding the children and family time. My heart raced. What did Martha say? She was furious at first, accused me of choosing you over her and the children. But when I made it clear this was about fundamental values, and her treatment of you was just the final straw, she became more calculating. She's worried about finances, about her social standing if we separate. And the children. Thomas's expression softened. I've made it clear that we'll have shared custody, and that includes regular time with their grandmother. No more manufactured excuses or scheduled appearances at parties. Real relationships take time and presence, and they deserve to know their grandmother. For the first time since the disastrous barbecue, I felt hope stir in my chest. Thomas, I never wanted to come between you and Martha. You didn't, Mom, he assured me. You simply forced us to confront truths we've been avoiding. Martha's behavior yesterday, what she said about you, what she revealed about her priorities, that was all her. And my failure to stand up for you and our family values earlier, that was all me. As our conversation continued, Thomas shared more about the changes he planned to make. He had already called a financial advisor to help create a plan for living within his means. He was looking at apartments near his office, something modest but comfortable, where the children would have their own rooms when staying with him. And he had told Martha in no uncertain terms that my house was off limits. As a topic of discussion, it was my home, my decision, and not a financial resource for their benefit. I don't know if Martha and I can find our way back to a healthy relationship, he confessed. There are deep issues of values and priorities that may be irreconcilable. But whatever happens between us, I promise you this. Mom, you will never again be sidelined in our family. You are an essential part of my life and my children's lives, and I've been a fool to let that connection weaken. As Thomas prepared to leave a few hours later, he hugged me tightly, reminiscent of the affectionate boy he had once been. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry it took this crisis to wake me up to what matters. I love you too, son, I replied, tears welling in my eyes. And it's never too late to reclaim the values that truly matter. Watching him drive away, I felt both drained and oddly energized. The confrontation had been painful, the truths revealed harsh and difficult. But in that difficult moment of standing up for myself, of refusing to be erased, something important had shifted. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it held the promise of authentic connection rather than performative family obligations. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated on that fateful day in Thomas's backyard. The initial weeks after the confrontation were awkward and painful. Martha attempted damage control with their social circle, painting me as a difficult, meddling mother-in-law who had caused problems in their perfect marriage. Some believed her, but others who had witnessed her shocking comments at the party were more skeptical. Thomas followed through on his promise to separate, renting a 2-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from my home. It was modest but comfortable, with a small balcony where we sometimes sat together in the evenings, talking about his childhood memories and the values he wanted to reclaim. The custody arrangement gave Thomas the children every Wednesday night and alternate weekends. On those days, I often joined them for dinner or Saturday activities. Amanda and James, initially confused by the separation, gradually adjusted to the new normal. Away from Martha's influence, they became more relaxed, less concerned with appearances and status. Amanda asked me to teach her how to bake cookies just as I had taught Thomas when he was a child. James brought his toy cars to play on my living room rug, creating elaborate racetracks just as his father had done decades earlier. Grandma, Amanda asked one evening, as we shaped cookie dough together, why didn't we see you very much before Mom always said you were busy? My heart ached at the innocent question. I was never too busy for you, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and don't arrange things as well as they should. But that's changed now, and we get to spend lots of time together. The children flourished under the new arrangement, especially when they were with Thomas. He had reduced his work hours, prioritizing time with them over the pursuit of ever greater income. They went to parks, museums, and community events together. Experiences that cost little but created lasting memories. Martha, however, struggled to adjust to the new reality. Her attempts to turn the children against me backfired when Thomas firmly established boundaries around speaking negatively about family members. When her social manipulation failed to bring Thomas back, she became more focused on financial matters, arguing over support payments and household expenses. "She's still fixated on your house," Thomas confided during one of our regular Sunday coffees. She mentioned it again during our last mediation session, suggesting that selling it could provide a financial cushion during our separation. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I told her that your home is not a topic for discussion and that our financial issues are the result of our choices, not your housing situation." He smiled ruefully. The mediator agreed with me pretty quickly on that point. For my part, I was discovering a new chapter of life I hadn't anticipated. At Thomas's encouragement, I joined a community center near my home, enrolling in a watercolor painting class I had always been curious about. There, I met Harriet and Louise, two fellow widows who quickly became friends. Our weekly coffee dates expanded to include movie nights, museum visits, and even a weekend trip to a nearby lake. Inspired by our shared experiences of widowhood and reinvention, we started a support group for older women navigating life after loss. What began as 4 women meeting in my living room grew to 15 regular attendees, creating a network of mutual support and friendship that filled my social calendar in a way it hadn't been in years. "Mom, you're busier than I am these days," Thomas joked after I had to reschedule our coffee because of a support group planning meeting. "Life has a way of surprising you," I replied. 6 months ago, I felt isolated and unwanted. Now I'm having trouble fitting everything into my calendar. Thomas's life was changing too. After 3 months of separation, he and Martha began divorce proceedings. It was Martha's decision, prompted by Thomas's refusal to return to their previous lifestyle and spending patterns. She said if I won't work the hours needed to maintain her standard of living, she'll find someone who will. Thomas told me surprisingly calm about this development. "And honestly, Mom, I'm relieved. I've been pretending to be someone I'm not for too long." Thomas had started seeing a therapist to work through his feelings about the marriage and his own role in allowing family values to be sidelined. The experience was helping him reconnect with the person he wanted to be, not just as a father, but as an individual. Another unexpected development came in the form of Diane, a kindergarten teacher Thomas met at a parent-teacher conference for James. Unlike Martha's calculated social climbing, their relationship developed naturally over coffee dates and conversations about educational philosophy. When Thomas finally introduced her to me 3 months into their friendship, I was struck by her genuine warmth and lack of pretension. "Thomas has told me so much about you," Diane said, accepting a cup of tea in my kitchen. "Especially your famous apple crumble. He says it's the best dessert in 3 counties. Mom won blue ribbons at the county fair 3 years running." Thomas said proudly, the admiration in his voice, a balm to my previously wounded heart. "You'll have to teach me the recipe," Diane said. "If Thomas and the kids love it so much, I'd like to learn to make it for them." "I'd be happy to," I replied, touched by her desire to incorporate our family traditions rather than dismiss them. Martha remained bitter about the divorce proceedings, especially when she realized Thomas would not be pressured into selling our family home or using his relationship with me as a financial resource. She continued to live in their too large house, struggling to maintain appearances on a reduced budget. The children reported that she was dating a wealthy businessman who drove an expensive sports car, seeking in a new relationship the financial security she had hoped to extract from our family connection. In a particularly meaningful development, I decided to renovate my unused fourth bedroom into a comfortable space for the grandchildren to stay overnight. Thomas helped with the painting and furniture assembly, and the children contributed their ideas for decorations and bedding. The project became a family affair, strengthening our bonds as we created something new together. "This is way better than our room at Mom's," Amanda confided as we hung butterfly decals on her wall. "It feels like love, not like a picture in a magazine." Out of the mouth of babes, I thought, touched by her perception. As spring turned to summer, I found myself sitting on my back porch one evening, watching Thomas flip burgers on my old charcoal grill, while the children played tag in the yard. Diane was setting the picnic table, arranging the potato salad and coleslaw I had prepared. The scene was so ordinary, and yet so precious: family togetherness without pretension or ulterior motives. "Penny for your thoughts, Mom?" Thomas asked, coming to sit beside me while the burgers cooked. "I was just thinking about that day at your backyard barbecue," I admitted. "How different things might be if I had chosen to leave quietly instead of confronting what I heard." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I've thought about that too. If you had left, Martha's campaign against you would have continued. I might never have seen the truth about our marriage or recognized how far I'd drifted from what really matters. Standing up for myself was the hardest thing I've done since losing your father," I said. "But it was also the most important. You taught me something that day," Thomas said, taking my hand. "You showed me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. You loved me enough to hold up a mirror to what our family was becoming, and I'll always be grateful for that." The simple barbecue in my backyard that evening was nothing like the elaborate social performance Martha had orchestrated 6 months earlier. There were no expensive outdoor kitchens, no catering staff, no business associates to impress. Just family and genuine connection, the things that truly matter when everything else falls away. As we gathered around the picnic table, I looked at the faces of those I loved. Thomas reclaiming his authentic self, Amanda and James learning the value of character over consumption, Diane bringing her natural warmth to our family circle. And in that moment, I felt Frank's presence strongly, as if he was sitting beside me, nodding in approval. "Before we eat," Thomas said, raising his lemonade glass, "I want to make a toast to Mom for teaching us that true strength isn't about material success or social status, but about having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. We love you, Mom." "To Grandma," the children echoed, clinking their plastic cups against mine. As we shared our meal in the golden evening light, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. Out of pain had come healing. Out of confrontation had come truth. Out of loss had come renewal. By refusing to accept erasure and disrespect, I had not only reclaimed my place in my family, but had helped all of us find our way back to the values that truly matter. Life doesn't always give you second chances. Sometimes you have to create them yourself with courage and conviction. That day in Thomas's backyard, when I heard those cruel words and chose to walk toward the conflict, rather than away from it, I took the first step toward reclaiming not just my family connections, but my own sense of worth and purpose. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who didn't value you? How did you find the courage to speak your truth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves today. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your voice and your value. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to face your own difficult truths with courage and grace.